Hello, it's Jim Hutchins for the Jerusalem Connection Truth Report for this week. I want to look at a couple of passages in the New Testament that affirm the name of our God, the name of Yahweh, and its inseparable connection with Jesus. One of the passages is from John chapter 13, and the context here is that Jesus is about to take part in the Last Supper, the last Passover, with his disciples. And prior to his doing that, he washes their feet. He humbles himself and washes their feet. And then he asks them this question. John chapter 13, verse 13. He says, "Do you understand what I have done to you?" Jesus asks. "You call me teacher and Lord." Now, parenthetically, let me stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance. Lord is the English translation of the Greek word kurios in the New Testament, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew word Yahweh in the Old Testament. So you have Yahweh in the Old Testament, kurios in the New Testament, and in the English, Lord is translated for both of those. So here's what's being said here. Jesus asked him, "Do you understand what I've done to you?" He says, "You call me teacher," and really what he's saying, Lord or Yahweh. You call me teacher and Yahweh, and rightly so, for that is what I am. I am your teacher. I am your Yahweh. Now that I, your Yahweh and your teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. And basically what he's saying is, in my humility and condescension, I am doing Yahweh's work. Now you do that for one another. It's a tremendous addition to our understanding that God, in his great humility as Yahweh, through Jesus, washes the feet of the disciples. And to confirm this, there's a passage that the Apostle Paul speaks of this same issue in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, when he's talking about the whole area of spiritual gifts. And here he says this in verse 3 of 1 Corinthians chapter 12. He says, "Therefore I tell you, no one who says, speaking by the Spirit of God, empowered by the Spirit of God, no one who says, speaking by the Spirit of God, Jesus is cursed. That's not of God. That's blasphemy. No one says that Jesus is cursed, not by the Spirit. But then conversely, and no one can say Jesus is Yahweh. No one can say it except by the Holy Spirit. No one can say Jesus is Yahweh except by the Holy Spirit. And why don't we hear from our pulpits, our teachers, our rabbis, our messianic rabbis, that Jesus is Yahweh? Because they've not been moved on by the Holy Spirit to confess that, to acknowledge that. You've heard me say this before. It's not in academia, not in religious circles, not within the church, but it's in the world of the worship leaders, in Christian musicians primarily, that you hear Yahweh identified with Jesus. So this is significant. No one can say Jesus is Yahweh except by the Holy Spirit, except they're being empowered by the Holy Spirit. Can you say that Jesus is Yahweh, the God of the universe, the creator of all things? Can you say that Jesus is Yahweh? If so, you have been empowered, ingratiated, if you will, by the Holy Spirit of God. And that's the truth.